Hello. Ever noticed that your brain just won't shut up? According to transpersonal psychologist Steve Taylor, our minds are like noisy machines, buzzing with thoughts, making images, replaying memories, and even inventing wild little stories all the time. It's as if there's a radio playing in your head 24/7, and you didn't even ask for it to be turned on. Now, when people start meditating and trying this thing called self-observation, they usually aim to focus on one single thing, like the breath, for example. Now, sounds easy, right? But it turns out it's really not. Thoughts sneak in like uninvited guests at a party. Sensations come in, memories, worries, random ideas. You name it, it can arrive without even being asked. Now, can you watch all this consciousness without freaking out? The trick, of course, isn't to push these thoughts or images away or get mad at them, but to simply notice them and move on. Now, with a bit and sometimes a lot of practice, you get better at not reacting automatically to whatever pops into your head. Now, when I was a boy playing in our garden, another boy tried to come in through the back gate. I told him to leave, and he threw the F word at me. Naturally, my inner little kid rage flared up, and I swore back at him. He left, but unfortunately for me, my mum heard it all and came out to scold me for swearing. Now, if I'd had this trick of being able to observe my own consciousness using mindfulness training back in those days, I might have paused when that lad swore at me. I might have reflected on my anger and even realised that my mother was within earshot. But hey, I was a child. I just reacted. Mindfulness meditation is becoming a big deal in the Western world. It's like a mashup of ancient contemplative practices from religion and modern psychology. Basically, it teaches you to step back from your thoughts instead of getting swept away by them. Instead of reacting with irritation, jealousy, or fear, like I did with that lad, instead we pause, we observe, and we make space. It's like training your brain to take a step back from the troubles in life instead of getting wiped out by them. Mindfulness teacher Jean Kabat-Zinn said, "You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf." And here's another gem, this time from a Chinese proverb. You can't prevent birds of sorrow from flying overhead, but you can stop them nesting in your hair. I like that one. Now, have you ever driven somewhere and then realised you have zero memory for the journey? It's like you were on autopilot. Now, unfortunately, most of us seem to go through big chunks of life like this, reacting without really noticing what's going on inside our heads. And when that happens, all sorts of negative thoughts, annoyance, envy, judgmentalism, all sorts of negative thoughts can quietly take the wheel. Happens to me too. Like the time recently when a pedestrian got angry with me when I was in the front garden. I had parked my car partly on the footpath. Well, I thought partly, he thought too much. He started shouting at me, Seemed most unreasonable of him, but he did. He got really angry. And instead of staying cool, I reacted with irritation. But then his wife joined in, shouting at me, and neither would listen to what I was saying. And I got really angry too, and it was just a mess. That's what happens when we don't hit pause. We default to knee-jerk reactions. But when we do start observing our thoughts, we develop something called the observing self. The observing self. It's like your own inner coach who is curious and non-judgmental, just watching what's going on, observing in a neutral way without getting emotionally caught up in what's happening inside. Another strand to this is, when we grow up, we start thinking of ourselves as separate individuals. And that's not a bad thing, but the ego can get a bit much at times. It starts wanting to be right. It wants to get its own way. It wants to win every argument. It wants to see things only from my perspective, to be proud of my opinions, wanting to please myself at other people's expense, being overcritical or holding grudges. And often these reactions come from feeling insecure or under threat, like I did in the garden when that lad came in, even when nothing really serious is going on. Here's a story to illustrate this point. A red frog lived happily in a small pond. It thought it was the biggest pond in the world. Of course, it thought that it'd never been outside his own pond. But one day there was a big storm, and it blew in a blue frog from a much bigger lake. The blue frog got swept into the red frog's pond. Now, naturally, the red frog asked, "Where are you from?" When the blue frog said his lake was bigger, the red frog freaked out. Jealousy turned to suspicion, then rage. And instead of learning something new, the red frog chased the blue one away. Sound familiar? We've all been that red frog at some point. But real growth happens when we take a breath, when we get curious, when we try to see things from someone else's perspective, when we try to give ourselves a chance to learn. Now here's a tricky one. I wonder what you think. Do your own thoughts belong to you? Now we often believe that because a thought pops into our head, so it must be ours. If I imagine a tune, I think I created it. If I feel tempted by a random ad, I assume it says something about who I am. But what if it's not true? Most of us do assume our thoughts are us, but so when we think something kind or clever, we feel good. But when we think something mean or dark, we feel ashamed. That's because we identify with our thoughts. Now, unfortunately for us, this can be really misleading. For spiritual teachers and even some psychologists say, this idea is a massive illusion. We say, I say, you say, I'm an angry person. But instead I could have said, or you could have said, I feel angry at this moment. Big difference. One means you are the emotion, the other means it's just passing through. Whatever we identify with, you see, has power over us. The more we believe our thoughts are us, the more they do control us. Meditation, however, helps us notice those thoughts without grabbing onto them. Now, here's a fascinating take from the 18th century mystic Emanuel Swedenborg. He claimed our thoughts don't actually come from us. They flow in from a different dimension, one he called the spiritual world. His own experience in his mystical states had been that he was constantly surrounded, and we are too, by spirits of other people, and they influence our thoughts and feelings without us even realizing it. Actually, they don't realize it too, Swedenborg claims. Now, some of these spirits are helpful and uplifting, while others not so much so. According to Swedenborg, when we align with selfish or negative thoughts, we attract unhelpful spirits to us. But when we choose compassionate and self-awareness thoughts, those negative influences slowly fade and better ones show up. Now, it's definitely an unusual idea, but kind of empowering too, because it means that even when you're stuck in a funk, you can change the channel by choosing not to feed into negative thinking. We may be able to conjure up feeling better in an instant, or we may not be able to do that at all. In fact, I don't think we can. But what we can do is decide not to get caught up in our anger, not to get caught up in our fear or envy. We can take a breath. We can notice what's going on. We can even choose to look in the direction of a kinder, calmer path. So maybe next time you find your mind is racing or someone cuts you off in traffic, you remember, you are not your thoughts. You're the one watching them. And that, my friend, is where the magic begins.